Welcome to the Skull King Football Podcast, presented by Vox DFS Firelines. Now, here are your hosts, Justin and Ryan Skullroot.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Skullroot, and with me tonight is my brother Justin. Say hi, Justin.
Hello, everybody.
All right, well, we've got an exciting show. Tonight is the very first waiver wire show of the season after finally actually seeing the players in actual games and not preseason games, and getting a little bit of an idea where some guys are going to end up, kind of what some roles are going to be. And while we understand that it's just one game,
In the words of Aaron Rodgers, relax.
So we're
Chill out, don't panic, and don't get all up on your high horse.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a little bit of the news, a couple of injuries we've kind of found out a little more information about, and then we're going to go into our waiver wire picks for this week to get you guys ready for the next week and get you guys some more wins. By the way, Justin, how did you do in the listener league this week? Well, while I'm waiting for Justin to come back, I actually, in the listener league, actually won my matchup. I had, even with the Detroit defense basically just pooping all over themselves, I did manage to have a really good game from Emmanuel Sanders, from Case Keenum. Who else did I have that had a great game? Oh, and Tyreek Hill. They basically won the week for me. So that is where we're at. Real quick before we get started, Justin, on the kind of the news and notes and everything. Real quick, how did your team do this week in the listener league?
I lost to Wyatt, who runs our Facebook group, but to me, I'm not panicking. I streamed defenses. The Saints killed me, and Doug Baldwin went out with a leg injury. So as much as I still considered Doug Baldwin a value where I got him, I have wide receiver backup, and as long as my defense doesn't go negative again, I'm pretty comfortable with my team.
All right, here we go. So let's go ahead and get into the news. Where is it? There we go. Starting off, minor news, not huge, but it's something to maybe note. ESPN's Adam Schefter reports that free agent wide receiver Rashad Perriman is working out for the Eagles. Really, I think the only reason that this is happening is because Alshon Jeffrey is still injured, and we're not necessarily sure when he's going to be coming back. So I think that's just kind of a fill-in. I don't see him actually being fantasy relevant. Bengals coach Marvin Lewis liked, quote-unquote, Joe Mixon's number of catches, 4, a whole lot right there, in week 1, and believes he can carry the ball up to 22 times per game. So basically what you're saying is that there's going to be a lot of work for Joe Mixon. I personally can see it. He played very well in this last game. I think that he, if he can still be able to catch the ball, he could be a great all-around running back.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that people were concerned about coming into the season from the preseason is that Mixon was still struggling to run the ball. Now, I'm going to temper my expectations because he played the Colts this week, who are garbage, maybe the second worst defense, second only to the Bills. But if he plays a quality defense, I'd be a little concerned about the running, but he's still going to get it in the passing game.
All righty. Next up, we've got Jaguars coach Doug Marrone considers Leonard Fournette's hamstring injury to be minor, but hamstring injuries can always, flare up and not necessarily go away all that easily. So it may be time to maybe look at TJ Yeldon. Not that it's a great option.
Yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit later. I like that option, specifically if you have Fournette, because TJ Yeldon came in and was very, very serviceable in the game. Touchdown, yards, catching the ball. Good option.
All right. The Patriots spent today working out former Browns first-round pick wide receiver Corey Coleman.
Of course the Patriots are. Of course they are.
Patriots are working out everyone at this point.
Yeah.
He also has a visit with the Eagles scheduled, just like Rashad Perriman did. So we'll kind of see where Corey Coleman ends up. And you know what? If he goes to New England, I can see him possibly being productive if he can keep his head on straight. But knowing Bill Belichick, that he may just not even want to deal with it. So,
Are you talking Perriman or Coleman?
yes.
I don't want either one of those guys to have any involvement because I don't need another guy taking targets away from Chris Hogan right now.
Here's one for all of you Seattle fans. Seattle Seahawks wide receiver Doug Baldwin has a grade 2 partial MCL tear. This is in his left knee, not his right knee that was giving him all the trouble in the preseason, or maybe it's his right knee that wasn't. Whatever it was, it's not in the knee that was giving him trouble. So now he's got 2 bad knees, which means that you are going to have to find someone else in that wide receiver core to use in your lineups. Tyler Lockett is one option. If you have already drafted him, you should be okay, especially in return leagues.
Yep.
But we've got an option coming up later that you'll want to hear. So
one of the things that I'll put out outside of the actual game of fantasy football, this is a reason why you advocate for an injured reserve spot on your bench at minimum of 1, because this is something where I'm looking in another league to put Baldwin on injured reserve, grab up a free waiver wire pick without having to drop somebody, keep my my bench depth intact without having to have a player that's not going to play sitting on my bench and then have to make moves and handcuff myself even more. At least 1 IR spot should be on everybody's rosters, period, personally. But this is a perfect situation of why.
All right, and looks like that's all the news. I didn't see it on here. Oh, here we go. Officially, I believe I saw that Delaney Walker was officially put on IR.
Yes.
It turns out that he also, not only did he have a dislocated ankle with a possible little bit of breakage in there, he also had ligament damage in the ankle. So he is gone. You need to find someone else. And we're going to give you a few names tonight.
Yeah, we're going to give you a few names, but I want to touch on the Titans really quickly here. With the loss of Delaney Walker, who are you giving the biggest bump to in terms of other offensive weapons? Is it going to be Dion Lewis out of the backfield because he showed a lot of great tools and versatility against Miami? Is it a Corey Davis? Is it a Tyrod Taylor who's going to be – they're going to be doing a little bit more 3 wide receiver sets now without their tight end? Who do you think is going to benefit – not that anyone really benefits from an injury, but who do you think is going to get the bump from that offense?
I think it's going to be a share of Dion Lewis and Corey Davis, because Corey Davis is the bigger body that Delaney Walker is that larger target to run some of those out routes, and I think that they may dump off passes a little bit more to Dion Lewis like they did in that game. I mean, Dion Lewis right now, he is the running back 1 in that offense.
Yes.
Derrick Henry looked god awful. What was it? 10 rushes for 29 yards,
and he was outsnapped.
Oh yeah, outsnapped big time. So I think that this is definitely the Dion Lewis. I am so glad I drafted him in one of my leagues. I'm very happy to see that he is going to be getting a good share of work.
Yeah, really quickly, I have a differing opinion on who's going to get the bump. I think the bump is going to come from a Rashard Matthews or a Taywan Taylor, because I don't think they're going to overwork Corey Davis because of the injury history and stuff like that. And they still have to stretch the field. You can't just continue to dump to your running backs. This is not – you don't have a Gronkowski and a deep threat like a Hogan where Tom Brady can then dump to whoever he wants to out of the backfield. You still have to stretch the field. So I think I would lean towards don't get me wrong, Corey Davis is going to get a slight bump, and Deion Lewis is going to get a slight bump. But those are players that are already on your rosters in 4th, 5th, 6th round kind of, or 7th round kind of space. I think that the bump is really going to come from those wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 spots.
I could see it for right now. It would be Taywan Taylor.
Yes.
Because Rashard Matthews, I believe, actually missed almost all of training camp.
Yeah, and he's still getting back up to speed.
So he's still getting back up to speed. Don't they have a new coach down there this year as well?
Yeah, new Mike Variable and new offensive coordinator in LaFleur.
Yeah, so he's learning it. He's
dodgeball coach.
So he's learning a completely new offense on top of the fact that he missed all of training camp.
Yeah.
So right now, I would give that bump to Taywan Taylor first.
Yeah, the other piece that I wanted to cover is Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers is officially listed as questionable. Nothing has been officially decided on his status for next week. He legendarily led them back for a win against Chicago. Put the dagger right in Greg's heart. He got a little mouthy when they were ahead 20-0 as a staff writer and Chicago Bears fan. But there has been no decision made about whether Aaron Rodgers will play Sunday against the Vikings. And so that's something to monitor. If you are like us and you like to only carry one quarterback, you need to grab someone if you don't already have one. And if you're in a 2-quarterback league, the waiver wire is going to be even deeper because people are grabbing 2 and 3. This is something to pay attention because he's your number 1 pick at quarterback.
I don't talk to many kids in my grade.
Is that a soundbite?
I'll edit that out. All right, so now that we have gone over all that, the news and the injuries, it's time to get into our waiver wire picks. So, Justin, I'm going to hand this off to you. We will start off with the quarterback. Who do you got for us to pick up this week?
Number 1, and this goes without saying that we've been a big fan of this player for a number of years. Was in a horrible weather situation for his game, but we're big believers in Tyrod Taylor. He's currently owned in 31% of ESPN leagues. This is a player that you're going to see all over the place be a waiver wire ad. This is not just us. Everyone's believing in Tyrod Taylor. He's a viable and streamable quarterback in fantasy football for years now. He takes care of the ball. He doesn't turn it over, although he did have 1 pick. He generally has less than 10 turnovers in a season, and he can beat you with his legs. So kind of like the upside you get from a Cam Newton in being able to score a touchdown on the ground, especially in 4-point quarterback touchdown leagues, he's going to get a 6-pointer if he gets it in the ground. Tyrod has talent around him that he didn't have in Buffalo. His passing percentage was horrible at 37.5 this last week.
Yeah, but the rain.
Yeah, rain, wind.
5 inches of rain.
Horrible weather. Once again, I preface that. Horrible weather. But he still managed to put 200 yards in the air, 77 on the ground, 2 total TDs. He's a startable quarterback. So if he's available and you're looking to have a backup, once again, for like an Aaron Rodgers with his leg injury, or a backup for Matthew Stafford as he got banged up tonight by the Jets of all teams, there are worse options than Taylor. Taylor is going to be highly valued. If you're in a fab system, you're probably going to want to bump a little bit more because you know the other Aaron Rodgers or the Stafford guy is going to be looking for quarterback.
All right. Is that the only one, or you got another one for us?
No, I've got another one in Case Keenum. Currently owned in 12% of leagues. Ryan's smiling because he picked Case Keenum in our 14-team league. And in what round?
Oh God, I think I got
it was like 11.
11th or 12th round. I was picking through my bench spots at that point and picked Case Keenum.
It was deep. Other people had taken 2 quarterbacks. I had taken 2 quarterbacks at that point because I liked the value of the quarterbacks that I got. Deshaun Watson needs to play better. But Case Keenum, now I don't like the 3 interceptions. Seattle is not the defense they were last year, even though they were 7th against the pass last year in fantasy. That didn't excite me. But if you're a believer in Case Keenum, or you had Mariota or Rodgers or Stafford, or you're in a 2-quarterback league, and he's somehow still available, he's a solid grab if you need him. He's not someone that in a 10-team league, 8-team league, 12-team league, I would look to start and feel 100% confident about. But he does get the Raiders, Chiefs, and Jets in the next 3 or 4 home games. Now, as long as he doesn't throw 4 interceptions to the Jets, he should be fine, Matthew Stafford. But the Raiders can have the ball thrown on them. They're not the defense they were with Khalil Mack. The Chiefs just gave up 450 yards in the air to Rivers. And the Jets, who knows, maybe they're a better defense. But that's 3 out of 4 weeks of the next 4 weeks are solid matchups for Case Keenum.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the running backs. Justin, who do you have for running backs? And if you miss one of mine, I'll definitely throw one in.
Now we talked about this guy briefly earlier, T.J. Yeldon, who is currently owned in 8% of ESPN leagues. Now, Fournette owners, it is my belief that you need to grab him as soon as possible if he's still on waivers. In a deeper league, 14-team league, he's not available. 12, maybe, definitely in a 10, unless the Fournette owner already has him as the handcuff. But with Fournette experiencing the hamstring injury this week, Yeldon came in and produced with 69 yards and a touchdown. He's even more valuable in PPR formats, as he was the leading target for Bortles with 7 targets coming out of the backfield. That is better than D.D. Westbrook, Dante Moncrief, Keelan Cole. Now, granted, under pressure, Bortles isn't that great of a quarterback, so he's looking for an outlet all the time. But if Fournette is going to be missing any time, a week, if not hamstring injuries, like we mentioned earlier, can linger for a long time, this is someone you should have as a solid backup because he proved in week 1 he can still produce. You've got a great offensive line, solid defense. They're going to be in a lot of run scripts, so Yeldon's a solid pickup for your bench.
I like the Yeldon pickup for a bench, especially in a deeper league where he may still be available, especially PPR because of his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield.
Yeah.
Who else you got?
The next one is a little bit of salt in the wound. My bold prediction was that Royce Freeman would be Offensive Rookie of the Year. Now, it is common practice by coaches, you saw this with Kareem Hunt last year, to be kind of on a snap count, pitch count, to use a baseball reference. Coming into the season, I was all about Royce Freeman. But in week 1, he shared the backfield carries 50-50 with Phillip Lindsay. Now, there's been jokes made about Phillip Lindsay and who is he. He played at Colorado, so he's home state. People in Denver know who he is. And then Lindsay was also the only running back of the 2 that got any targets out of the backfield. 2 targets and a touchdown through the air. If the timeshare continues, I would kind of give the edge to Lindsay right now because of the involvement in the passing game, especially in PPR leagues. Now, I am not selling on Royce Freeman anytime soon. Once again, saw him a lot in college, playing in the Pac-12 in Oregon. Solid player. I think this is more trying to hedge against injury long-term because it's a long season. But Phillip Lindsay is someone to consider in a 12-team league or more. Not in a 10 because I don't know if he'll still provide value because Royce, to me, is still a guy.
Yeah, I think that Lindsay can provide, especially in those deeper leagues. But I still think it's going to be a pretty even timeshare. I don't think, the Seahawks were just kind of chewed up alive in that game. So I think that against a little more solid defense that has a little more experience, I think that the running backs in general would have been held down a little bit more. But Phillip Lindsay definitely showed some electricity. So
yeah, and against the better defense, the cream's going to rise to the crop, and that's where Royce Freeman's going to prove his worth a little bit more. And so my next running back, unless you got something.
No, I was wondering if you were gonna get one more in there.
Yeah, I got one more, and it's one that I know you're going to love. You've called him Danny Woodhead 2.0.
2.0.
And so Austin Eckler is currently only owned in 11% of ESPN leagues, which means he's widely available. Phillip Rivers said it himself in the press conference after the game that they could have had 600 yards against the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, Melvin Gordon led the backfield with 15 rushes and 13 targets. That's 28 potential times he could have touched the ball. But Eckler had a big day himself, 10 touches, 126 yards, and a touchdown. I've been a big buyer on Rivers all season. I have him in all of my leagues. He's the quarterback I've been high on. I even had him as quarterback 1 for my prediction this week. Had it not been for Fitzpatrick going off and Mahomes going off, Phillip Rivers was still right there as a top performer. So I'm a buyer, and if I can get a receiver or someone involved in the passing game / running game that's going to have 10 or more touches in that offense, I'm buying. So I'm a big buyer on Austin Eckler.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I don't know. Again, we go back to the is he a 10? I don't know if he'll be available in 10-team leagues. I don't know if he will be usable in 10-team leagues unless you've got like larger rosters that have like 2 and 3 flexes. Using 2
and
and
you
3
get into and you're into bye weeks.
Yeah. I
12 and above, yes.
Yeah, I drafted him in the 14-team listener league, so I've already got him in that league. So.
Plus, you and I have talked about this, that Melvin Gordon does not have a high yards per rush average.
Correct.
He's a high volume guy, and that's where he gets his yards. So look for if because of that volume later in the year, Melvin Gordon has been a little banged up in his young career. So that's a solid handcuff to have in 12-team leagues or more, regardless of his involvement moving forward, even though he had a good game here.
Yep. All right. Is that it for running backs?
That's what I have for running backs.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the wide receivers. And for those of you who got a chance to watch the Monday Night Football games and the absolute drubbing that Detroit took, part of that was because of Quincy Enunwa. Now, for those of you who may not remember and be like, who is this guy? He kind of came out of nowhere. Quincy Enunwa was a guy that we were kind of high on going into last season, 2017, because of how well he was playing in 2016.
Really high.
And it turned out that
Martavius Bryant high. Sorry.
Former Josh Gordon high. But Quincy Enunwa had a bulging disc in his neck that actually he had to have surgery on and forced him to miss the entire season last year. But he was the volume receiver for the Jets 2 years ago. I am definitely a fan of his, and seeing that he got 10 targets, 6 receptions, 63 yards, and a touchdown tonight, I think that he is going at only 7%. I use the Yahoo percentages, only 7% owned in Yahoo leagues. He is definitely a guy that if you drafted running back heavy, he is the guy that I'm definitely looking at to pick up.
Yeah. And one thing to highlight, Robbie Anderson, who was the before the season, the go-to that everyone wanted. He was the hotness of the Jets offense, taken probably before Crowell, definitely before Bilal Powell, and Darnold's not even drafted. But he was the guy, and because of the relation or because of the connection he had with McCown last year. Darnold's a new quarterback, and it is obviously a Enunwa in week 1.
Yeah, we'll see if that continues next week, but I would definitely want to pick him up and at least store him on the bench for now, just to see if it continues.
Yes.
The second one I have, this one is a major surprise because no one had them on their. The only person that I know that had them on their fantasy radar is the guy that runs his agency, the company that represents him, and that's Gary Vaynerchuk and VaynerMedia and Vayner Sports. Geronimo Allison 8 targets, 5 receptions, 69 yards, and a TD. He had more targets than at one point he had more targets than Randall Cobb, and he had many more targets than Devontae Adams. Adams had like 3 or 4 targets, only in a couple catches. Allison got targeted 8 times. Now you can go ahead and say that Rodgers never forces the ball. He really doesn't. He finds the guy that's open, which is really what helped Devontae Adams break out a couple years ago. I think that Allison could very well be a contributor in fantasy. I don't think it'll be consistent because of all the weapons that they have. But he is definitely a guy that in terms of bye weeks that are coming up, I want to say in week 4, week 5, a bye week replacement, he is definitely worth an ad for that to just kind of hold on to see how he goes. But he is a guy that I would be jumping on right now.
Would you consider him the new Jordy Nelson?
No, I think that Devontae Adams, honestly, is Jordy Nelson. I think that Geronimo Allison is what everyone thought Devontae Adams was going to be a few years ago when Jordy was still there.
Meaning?
When Devontae Adams got drafted, everyone thought that he was going to be the new guy, that he was going to be huge. It took him 3-4 years to finally realize that. Even when Jordy Nelson tore his ACL and Adams was forced to be like the number 1, number 2 guy, it took him a while to actually. I mean, he flopped for a while to be.
And people dropped him.
Yeah, so I think that Allison, although he's been in the league for a couple of years, I think that he is kind of stepping into that role of being the quality number 3 receiver. And we'll say it again, Rodgers does not use tight ends all that often. So Jimmy Graham going to the Packers wasn't necessarily a great thing for Jimmy Graham. So I think that Geronimo Allison could be taking some of those targets that everyone thought was going to go to Jimmy Graham. So,
yeah, Geronimo Allison. When I was talking about the 2.0 part about Jordy Nelson, is that he's going to be the solid number 2 option. Do you think Allison is going to be targeted more, the same, or less than Randall Cobb? Because remember, Randall Cobb was shopped in the offseason. So not necessarily a pivotal part of the offense coming in from a thought process, but now Geronimo Allison has been there. I had him a little off my radar just to see what was going to go down because of the Randall Cobb trade potential.
Yeah.
But I definitely believe in Allison moving forward. Benchable, not startable yet. 1 game against the Chicago Bears, who folded up on defense in the second half, really the fourth quarter, is not enough for me to put him as a starter, but definitely someone to grab.
Okay. Next up, I've got Brandon Marshall, and really Brandon Marshall is because of the news that came down about Doug Baldwin. The Seahawks weren't able to really get a whole lot going on offense for the most part. They had the big play to Tyler Lockett, the 51-yard pass play for the touchdown. But other than that, they had a 66-yard pass play to Will Dissly to get them down close to the end zone. So they had a couple of plays that really helped them out. But once it was official that Doug Baldwin was not coming back in, Brandon Marshall led all Seahawks receivers in targets. He had a touchdown called back because of offensive pass interference, which I didn't think was offensive pass interference. It did not look like he had a massive push. It didn't look like he pushed off to me, but whatever. He did manage to get a 20-yard touchdown later on. I think that he is that big body. Him and Dissly at tight end, I think, are the 2 big bodies that Wilson may rely on now that Jimmy Graham's gone. So I definitely think that Marshall, again, I don't think he's someone for like a 10-team league, but maybe a flex play for a 12-team or a bench guy, or if you've got deeper leagues, he's someone to look at.
I agree.
I mean, I could keep going with a few of these guys, but I'm just going to throw a couple names out. Philip Dorsett of New England had a very productive game. He's a guy to look at. played very well.
I think temporarily.
Until maybe even until Julian Edelman comes back. Deshaun Jackson had a huge game. A lot of people thought he was washed up. He may be, I would be willing to pick him up. I think he's on like 20% of leagues, on 26% of leagues on Yahoo. Had a huge game. I don't think that's necessarily coincidence, but he did get injured and is in concussion protocol and may not even play this next game. So because of that, I would look at Chris Godwin, who also finished with, I want to say, 4 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, everyone finished with yards and a touchdown.
So whether it be Deshaun Jackson or Chris Godwin, those are guys to look at. And then the big one I know that Justin loves, kind of vindicated him a little bit, was Kenny Golladay. I would say with let's see, what was it? He finished with 12 targets, 7 receptions, 114 yards. So he is definitely a big target to look at. So
one of the things I want to point out about Golladay specifically as we wrap up the wide receivers here is this is something that I had mentioned before, and we talked about this briefly just before the show. When Golladay was on the field last year, Marvin Jones' targets dropped from 10 to 5. Now, Golladay didn't play all year, and Marvin Jones had a great second half of the season in the absence of Kenny Golladay. But Golladay is a bigger target over the middle and the deep threat, and I think is going to outproduce Marvin Jones Jr. Regularly. Maybe not for the whole season, but it is going to happen on a regular basis.
All right, and those are my wide receiver thoughts. Why don't we quickly hit up the tight ends before we end the show?
Yeah, so number one, or not in any particular order, the first one on my list here is Eric Ebron, who maybe is thankful he's not playing for the Lions anymore. Currently owned in 16% of ESPN leagues. Eric Ebron could never live up to his number 1 draft stock with the Detroit Lions, but the Colts have a history of running 2 tight end sets and being very successful at it. Ebron only had 5 targets, so that makes me a little nervous, but he converted 4 of those into catches, 51 yards, and a touchdown. With a few tough matchups coming up for the Colts, I look for Ebron to be an additional outlet for Luck, as Hilton and Doyle will be taking on tougher coverage. Ebron has the skill set to be a top 10 tight end. So this is one where you can add with the potential for upside and more involvement after week 1.
Yeah, I like Eric Ebron. He's a guy that, especially for the people like me who lost Delaney Walker in all their leagues, he is a guy to possibly target to get a replacement.
Yeah, my next one is Jared Cook. But a monster game in the Monday Night Football game against the Rams, currently owned in 28% of ESPN leagues. Last year, he was the tight end 12 in PPR formats for ESPN. The Gruden era was supposed to be a run-first offense, and in the first game, it was kind of, but they ended up with a whole lot more passes than they did run yards. Cooper and Nelson were the stories of the offseason. And they were supposed to be the targets in the offense. Maybe it was a tough matchup against the Rams where Talib and Peters are taking away those receivers, and that's what left Jared Cook open. In game 1, it was clear that Cook is still very much a part of this offense. 11 targets, 8 catches, 153 yards. This is not reaching or chasing points. This is finding that overlooked guy in the draft that wasn't drafted and putting him on your roster.
He's been overlooked by me for years because he's never done this. Let's be honest. He had a couple semi-productive years with the Rams, I believe it was, but he's never really had many games like this, like he had tonight.
Yeah, he's been the tortoise of the race in tight ends, where he's been the slow and steady, no splashes, but will still be a top tight end 12, 10 to 12 kind of range kind of player. And so the last one I have, I want to mention because he had a monster game and no one saw it coming, and he's owned in 0% of leagues. So this is a deep league ad, 14 to 16 or more, or a dynasty ad, and that's Will Dissly. Got drafted to the Seahawks because of his pass blocking ability, but Pete Carroll said during the halftime interview that they had seen this type of performance during the offseason workouts and preseason, and they were waiting for him to pop when it came to gameplay. Well, the pop happened. He grabbed 3 catches on 5 targets for 105 yards and a touchdown. This is the new 88. And so, because Jimmy Graham played with Seattle last year and was 88, Seattle has utilized the tight end position a lot, even before the addition of Jimmy Graham last year, who's now with Green Bay. So it's likely that they will continue to use him. And had Russell Wilson not sailed one in the end zone over Dissly's head by about 1.5 feet, Dissly has 2 touchdowns against Denver. So we could have talked about a 2-touchdown day from Dissly and potentially the top tight end of the day, and no one had talked about him. So it's still yet to be seen what his involvement's going to look like for the whole season, obviously, because this is just game 1 and he's a rookie. Ed Dixon is looking to return soon. Van Nett has been kind of the popular pick from a streaming option. But in deeper leagues, Dissly is an option to look at.
I agree with you. He's definitely one to look at and kind of see where he can end up. All right, well, that's it for our Waiver Wire show. We want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast. We will be back tomorrow to kind of go over some of the starts and sits for the week, and we'll kind of see where it goes from there. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. We will be back, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Skull King Nation. Thank you for listening to the Skull King Football Podcast. Did you like this episode? If so, be sure to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube to subscribe. Also, please leave us a rating and reviews to let us know how we can better help you rule your leagues.